Hi, my name is Oli and I'm a year 12 student studying in the UK applying to medicine, and in this video I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Notion again, because a lot of people asked me, how do you actually come up with the questions on Notion? How do you actually decide what to write and how to phrase the questions and how to transform the info from the textbooks into the questions that you can use with active recall? Making notes in Notion is not something that I can make into tips or rules, so I thought that the best way to describe it is to actually just take you along with me on how I make my notes. Like, essentially that's it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Notion. So today I'm going to do biology notes, which should make sense to you. And the notes that I'm going to be doing today is biodiversity. All right, so we're doing 3.4.5, 3.4.6. So species and taxonomy, biodiversity within a community. That's what we're doing. So the first thing that I always do when I begin to make notes is I identify which part of the spec I've been taught. So I have all of my notes in GoodNotes. So let's open up GoodNotes. This is what we're doing. So this is what we've learned so far. And info means that there is information in these documents. So if I open up info, classification of organisms. So here you can see the booklet that we did in class. So before I start making notes, I go to the spec because I have to make sure that my notes are in line with the spec. I go to 3.4. This is what I'm going to be making notes on, this page right here. So you just have to look at what they actually want you to say and do that. I'm going to start with classification of organisms, which is what I think we learned first. I can't even remember anymore. I go to species and taxonomy. I open this up. On the right, I have the information that I need to put into the question format. So the first thing that comes to my mind that catches my eye is towards classification and taxonomy. They are also in the title, so I'm assuming that they are quite important. So I am going to go ahead and do toggle and ask define classification. Classification is defined as, let's check the spec, what it says here. Yep, it talks about classification here, so organizing is a keyword, so I'm going to highlight it. So for me, it's really important when I'm writing the answers to these questions to highlight the words that are key, that I can associate with the keyword and with the question that I'm asking myself, because if I don't highlight the words, it's going to be hard for me to remember the answers. And sometimes, you open up a toggle, like if I go back to immunity, this is what I did a couple of days ago. For some of the questions, the answers are really, really long. So if I don't highlight stuff, there's just going to be a block of text. So let's go process of inflammation. So here I try and highlight stuff. So sometimes the teachers give us a little bit too much information that I think wouldn't be necessary. For example, here it says, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is the practice of biological classification. And then in brackets, it has putting organisms into groups, but that's literally the previous explanation of classification. So I don't know why the teacher put it into brackets, so I'm not going to put it in here. So the next thing that I see in my notes is actually a table comparing bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. This is an answer to the question, how detailed should you make your questions? So you could ask, what are the 3 domains of life? What is bacteria? What is archaea? What is eukarya? Those are 4 questions. But when you asked, what are the 4 domains of life? There's literally no point asking the next 3 because it's just easier to put it all in one place. So when you're saying, what are the 4 domains of life? You know that this question is prompting you to say everything you know about the 3 domains of life. Also, it's quite important during the lessons. This is something that you can't really do once you've already had your lessons, but you can go over that stuff and to make sure that you understand everything. But I remembered when we were going through this didn't make sense to me. I didn't see a difference between single-celled prokaryotes and unicellular and 1 or more eukaryotic cells. Like, this didn't make sense to me. As you can see here, in orange, I explained what it meant to me, so I'm saying only 1 type of cell or more than 1 types of cell. So this is something that I have to put in my notes because it's what makes sense to me. So when you're learning new information, also try and understand everything and write stuff down. So later when you come back to it, like, I don't remember any of this. We learned it like a month ago. So these little notes that I made for myself are extremely helpful right now. I'm reading through this and it says no membrane-bound organelles. And that makes sense to me because I remember in the beginning of year 12, we were learning about the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and how like in eukaryotes there are like the organelles inside the cells are bound by membranes, and like most of the organelles have their own membrane, like chloroplasts and the nucleus, and like everything has their own membrane, whereas in the prokaryotes everything is just kind of floating around. So I imagine this and I know what it means, and I don't know it in a lot of detail, but I know the basic outline of what they're saying. So I don't need to write it down. But if you read, like if you came to making these notes and you read no membrane bound organelles, and you would read this and you'll be like, organelles have membranes? Or then try going back into your notes or Googling or searching stuff up, but basically do everything that you can to understand what it means and then summarize it in your notes. If you look at something and you don't recognize it, you don't understand the order of steps. First, you research to make sure you understand what it is, and second, you make a note of it in a place which triggered you to remember it. So you just really have to make sure that every single thing that you put in adds some sort of value to what you're trying to make notes on. As soon as I write down series of groups, that doesn't make sense to me. Groups of what? See, so I just quickly scanned through this and the term taxa still doesn't make sense to me. Series of groups. So I'm gonna go to Google and search up taxa because this doesn't make sense. Okay, yeah, so now, okay, so taxon is basically any of the kingdom, phylum, class, order, any of these can be called a taxon. So see, it says a taxonomic group or any rank such as species, family, or class. So here I'm gonna say, instead of saying series of groups, I'm just gonna say taxon. So this now makes sense to me. And I wrote it down, and I will now remember what's a taxon and what are taxa. This, sometimes it can be quite hard to come up with questions. For example, here, groups are arranged in a hierarchy. As you go down the hierarchy, organisms become more closely related. Smaller groups are found within larger groups. There is no overlap in the groups. You can't really say define a hierarchy because that is not a definition of the hierarchy. It's just a word that is used. Remember that you're doing these questions for yourself, so you just have to remember what you wanted from yourself. Like for this, how I would ask a question would probably be, this seems like a description to me, because information can be separated into description, explanation, or example, and this seems like a description to me, and a lot of biology is description. So this is description, so I'm gonna say So I'm going to highlight the hierarchy because that is the key word for this. So here, I talked about the 3 types of information: example, description, and explanation. Well, here they give a lot of examples. Like my teacher gives us a lot of examples, and I don't actually need this. And there's a lot of really random information that I don't need. Like I don't need to know the exact species of like a tiger, but I do need to remember the different levels of classification. And here I actually wrote a mnemonic for myself. King Philip came over for good spaghetti. I would say that use keywords in your questions, so just so that you know what you want from yourself, because it's quite a good habit to get into, is just like analyzing the keywords. In an exam, you have to look at what they want from you. So when they say explain or describe, these are different things. So it's quite good just getting used to using these command words, they're called. So I use them in my questions as well, just so that I know what I want from myself. Like if it's a definition, it's a definition. If it's a what or how or an explain, then it's an explanation and it is detailed. So a couple of things that I want to say. I'm doing quite repetitive things, so I think you got the gist. I'm not just gonna keep just typing up the notes, but yeah, I'll do that off camera. I don't want to bore you. But there are a couple of things that I remembered from doing the immunity that I want to mention that I think would be useful. So when I write out the questions, I tend to put the keyword of the question in all caps, just because I find that it's difficult coming back to questions. Because like, for example, if I'm doing a prep homework, okay, so when I'm doing my homework, I sometimes need to go back and refer to the information that I need, and then I know that I want to find the question about the humoral response. And now when I look at this page of questions, I can see immediately where the humoral response is, but that is because it's in all caps. So as you can see, the keywords, I put them in all caps. And because, as you can see, I make my notes in order of the notes that I have during the lesson, most of the time, if I can see humoral response, I know that the questions around this will also be more likely about comparing the humoral response to something else, or about something similar to the humoral response, because my teachers normally structure it in like a logical way. And don't be scared to copy and paste stuff from your notes. For example, here, explain the process of phagocytosis. I literally just copied a comic slip that I had to do for my homework. It has pictures, it has explanation, and I don't have to write it out all again. Like, it just saves time. Like, don't do things that you don't have to do. And this is what I talked about in my why I'm taking 4 A-levels video, because one of the reasons is because it keeps me busy, and it means that I only do the things that I really need to do. So it's like, if I already have a picture and an animation of how phagocytosis works, I'm not going to spend another 5 minutes typing out every single stage and copying and pasting every single photo next to the stage, because I don't have those 5 minutes, and I'd rather start going to the next topic or do some more questions. I hope that this kind of helped you and showed you how I make notes. Just make sure that you understand everything. Like, if you don't understand, just copying it from one place to another is no use. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. And if you want to know more about my tips on how I organize all of this, then you can go and check out my previous video about Notion. You can follow my Instagram if you want to, even though I don't really post anything on there. But I will see you in the next video, and have a great day. Bye bye. I really need a coffee right now.